everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Hope you're doing well. Today on the show, we have a different kind of guest, a athlete who some of you might know, Daniel Carcillo, two-time Stanley Cup champion, played 9 seasons in the NHL, experienced 7 concussions, and had a lot of issues as a result of that and a number of other things that happened. And Daniel found healing through traditional plant and fungi ceremonies. And he believes that a lot of that stuff has improved his traumatic brain injury status. And we get into it in the show and talk about Daniel's project and a lot more. So, yeah, this is a big topic for me because I know a lot of people with brain injuries, and I, suspect I might have some and probably will have more. Not really the best, but, it's kind of what I do. So I'm really just happy to see that there are folks out there working on this. I know that it's not just athletes. I think there are some Navy SEAL groups like vets helping folks with a lot of brain injuries recover. So I really, really appreciate that folks are digging into this, and I really appreciate Daniel's work and working with Decrim Nature in Chicago to really help there. So I hope you all enjoy the show. Let me know what you think. Email us at psychedelicstoday@gmail.com or hit us up on socials. We're all over the place there. And so we, in early January 7th to be exact, kick off our Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course. We'd like to just make sure you all know that there are limited spaces. I think we have about 40 total seats across the 2 classes, and one of them only has a couple spots left. So if you want to join us, please jump in soon. You can learn more over at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. The class does give you continuing ed credits in the state of California. And if you are a psychologist, therapist, or nurse, and those are highly transferable to other states and other careers, from what I understand. So check it out. And we've got all the information up there if you want to learn more about it. We'd love to have you. So yeah, the course is amazing. It's really in depth. We like to say it's like the ideal foundations course. So if you don't really know exactly where in the field you want to go or want to get a good lay of the land in a short period of time, this is a great place to start. So come on down, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And I think that's it for now. We will see you all on the other side. Thanks for listening to Psychedelics Today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Daniel Carcillo. Thank you for joining us today, Daniel. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing pretty great. So I forget, I think it might have been Del Jolly that connected us from Unlimited Sciences because they're doing some really interesting work around traumatic brain injury and psychedelics. And you came up as a really strong advocate for people in the professional sports world because there's so much head injury in professional sports, and it's really under-discussed. You mind telling us a little bit about your story with head injuries in sports?
Yeah, for sure. So I played 12 years professionally in hockey. 9 of those seasons were in the NHL, and I received 7 diagnosed concussions and thousands of other subconcussive hits. And during our career, we were never educated, much less on mental health, but the effects or traumas to the brain and what that can bring on as far as symptomology. And we had a bunch of information withheld from us, from the league and from their medical professionals. And so I never ever got the right treatment for my brain injuries, and really nobody does. And I'm such a strong advocate for transparency and for just, telling us the truth, telling us the real risks, what mental health complications can come about because of the changed brain chemistry after trauma to the head or to the body, if it's hard enough. And it forced me into retirement in 2015. And I was only 30 years old. And
Wow.
when I retired, it was just, everything hit me kind of like a tidal wave. And the year I decided to retire, I made that decision primarily because my best friend, Steve Montador, I watched him struggle for a good year and a half, almost 2 years after he retired from the game. And they ended up finding extensive and florid CT all over his brain. And he was only 35 at the time that he passed. So it really scared me, and I saw a lot of the same symptomology that he had. And so I just really made a decision to step away. And then the next, it's almost been 5 years, has been dedicated to recovering my own brain health, showing people how bad it really was and how bad it got in a transparent way on social media. And because I always knew that I'd find something that would work for me. And thank gosh I did. And psychedelics and medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane and reishi and CBD derived from hemp really saved my life.
Yeah. I think it's probably happening more than the public understands in pro sports. I feel like there's probably this underground where people are discussing it, but perhaps they don't want to be as public as you are. Have you seen
Yeah,
anything like that?
yeah. You got to be really careful when you're an athlete with what you say, especially in the sport of hockey. The last thing that guys want to do is be a distraction to the team. And as soon as you start speaking out necessarily like against, the medical treatment that you're getting, you can expect backlash.
Mm,
And so, I mean, it's extremely difficult. The reason I didn't do it during my career is I just didn't have the education to recognize the signs and symptoms, and then to really, understand what was going on with my brain. I didn't have the time or freedom to really delve into that. And it's really strange when you're in your career, you feel you're comfortable being uncomfortable. You're hurt pretty much the whole time, and you get 2-3 months off to recover, and you're working out, and you never really recover. So the retribution is real for sure. And so I don't mind doing it. I've since been obviously ostracized from the hockey world, but that was expected, and I knew that that was going to be a consequence for the work that I had to do. And I just felt like, and still feel like I just have to continue to do it. All I'm doing is just, I'm telling the truth. I'm not trying to tell people to not play sports. And really, I mean, to be honest with you, Joe, like I have an athletic background, and then the guys in the league will see this and hopefully, think twice about returning too soon. But it really is for the traumatic brain injury community as a whole. And that extends to veterans with all the subconcussive and concussive blows that they receive, not understanding the mental health complications when they leave. And it extends to firefighters, it extends to police officers, really anybody that has experienced trauma in a physical way and even an emotional way, because that's a part of my journey as well. There was a lot of emotional trauma coming up in hockey, as far as the hazing abuse and sexual verbal. So there's a lot of fights that I fight on a lot of different fronts, and I just try to be as transparent as possible with the community and with social media, so that I really wanted to show like how bad it really got. And then now I'm showing the recovery phase. Thank God, 13 months ago I was introduced to these medicines, and I back it up with brain scans and blood work, and it's I'm just blessed to have found recovery. And I want people to know that you can do it too. You can find it too. And this is one tool, right, that I use, and there's a lot of options for us.
So, how did you first encounter the healing properties of reishi, lion's mane, and psilocybin containing mushrooms? Did somebody come to you?
Yeah, yeah. I was invited to a farm by a former teammate, and it was really to find my new purpose. I was kind of lost 13 months ago. Again, just like fully ostracized from hockey. I used to own a studio rink, and then I went and I was teaching kids off ice workouts. But again, the advocacy work became a much bigger story. And so I had decisions to make. And then I got invited to this farm. And since I wasn't, I still had a little bit of a stigma attached to it. Government does an extremely good job of making, attaching stigmas to these medicines. And I wasn't coaching kids anymore. So I thought, all right, I can go and learn about this. And, he was kind of knocking on my door for a couple years. And I was ready, I was ready for anything because I was making plans to take my own life. I thought I was a burden to everybody around me. And I just didn't want to raise my kids and see me like vibrating on that negative and frustrated vibration. So ended up getting invited to the farm, learning. Like I think that's the biggest thing, right? For us is not just like on a whim because you hear about it, go and try it, but actually like delve into the education about it. And really you have to make it make sense to you. And then the treatments will take hold, and so I went there. I didn't expect to do a ceremony. And that's kind of what was introduced to me the first night. And I'm a pretty big sign guy. And I was just like, well, I really don't have anything to lose. And I actually almost canceled the trip out of fear. And that's one of my symptoms is the isolation and the depression. And that psilocybin hero dose just really saved my life. It woke up, it's different areas of my brain that were shut down due to both emotional and physical trauma. And after that visit, I ended up, starting to farm cannabis and did 750 plants last year and did 2 acres this year, a little over 3,000 plants. And I just started working with plants and like really, gained a new perspective on life is what that ceremony helped me do. And because of the concussion work, I was delving into so many medical papers. I ended up seeing a study in 2014 with Robin Carhart Harris and a placebo brain and a brain on psilocybin, and the right and left and brain hemispheres communicating at a rate that's, I've never seen before. And I kept going to these neurological clinics and they kept telling me, we're going to build these new pathways for you. And we're going to stimulate the regions of your brain that are shut down due to trauma. So I started to correlate both of those things together. And after I found the recovery, like I'm a big believer in being quiet for a really long time to make sure that, this is real, because it was really so unbelievable. So around the 6-month mark, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. Everybody around me was starting to see it. It really took hold. So then I did some brain scans and it confirmed the way I felt. And I don't have any abnormalities now in my brain scans or in my blood work. So it's just a remarkable recovery that I've made the last 13 months. And I want people to know about it. I want them to know it's an option because right now there's no novel TBI care option.
Yeah. Can you talk about what kind of features were showing up in your blood work and your brain scans before
Yeah,
psychedelics?
I had the free testosterone of 72-year-old male. And I was at the time 34. And my cortisol levels were 3 times as much. That's the stress hormone.
Yep.
And that happens a lot with TBI patients, right? Or TBI survivors. We like have this thought in our mind that we want to get back to the person that we were before the injury or injuries or insults. And it's just not the way to think about it. We have to change our perspective on that injury and understand and really know that we can get even better than we were before. If we find the right treatments that work for us individually. So that was a really big thing that I did is and that the medicine helped me do is really change that perspective. And yeah, it started to flush into like my relationships, my communication with my wife and my kids. And I actually like wanted to go outside and wanted to be around people. And it really just enhanced my quality of life. And it was, it was definitely life-saving for sure.
Mm. So Are you hearing people leave professional sports and reach out to you at this point for a little bit of advice?
Yeah, behind closed doors for sure. Because again, it's right now, especially with athletes, they're in NHL specifically, you got to be really careful
Yeah.
with who you talk to and what you say. But I keep everything in confidence with guys, and when they reach out, it's always whatever's said stays between us. And but there's a lot of guys interested in it for sure, and you could take out the facts that it'll help to bring the brain back online, and it'll help you be more creative, and it'll help you be a better athlete. Like there really is a human optimization component to it, because this medicine is for everybody, and you don't have to have an injury to be able to take it. I really believe that it can enhance athletic ability and creativity and problem solving, and you need all of those things, reaction time, and you need all those things to be a really good hockey player. And it's so minuscule between the guys in the minor leagues and the AHL and the guys in the NHL, and this could be a key that could unlock something for guys that just need to take that next step.
Mm, yeah. It's always an interesting conversation, like with high performers. Like at the same time, you might have like a long term performance boost. There could be a few weeks or a couple months where you might have like a hiccup at what you're doing. So it's got to be like a hard step. So I imagine many folks are saying like, okay, let's just look at lion's mane, reishi, CBD, like things that are known kind of safe for brain repair. Not known safe. That's not the right one. The right way to say that. No severe side effects.
Right.
Yeah, and you can get right back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I think microdosing is really interesting.
Hmm.
All hallucinogenic effects, and you can still operate within your day. And really, I mean, that's brought my recovery to another level. And I use that in conjunction with, the bigger dose ceremonies to get the brain back online. When things do start creeping in, it's not perfect. You have to continue to work with the medicine. And I've worked with it a couple times in big ceremonies over the last 13 months, like usually on average every 3.5 months. But the microdosing is really, really interesting, and, has helped my wife. She had migraines since she was 15, and
Mm.
she's not having them anymore. So and it's not like an and one and two type of deal. There's a lot of people that have anecdotal stories, and hopefully the science and research on microdosing catches up. But there's a lot of research out there already on this medicine. I would say even more so than CBD and lion's mane.
Oh, right.
As far,
More data just on psychedelics. I agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, showing the efficacy and the safety,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there's lots of companies out there, doing it the right way. And it's something that I've really toggled with the last 6 to 7 months. Like, I'm a part of Decriminalized Nature and the movement. I brought the resolution forward to Chicago, and it's really great. It's a really amazing movement, and it restores our inalienable right to use these plant medicines and just puts it at the lowest law enforcement priority. But when I think of how to get 1 million people the help that they need, there's 50 to 70 million new TBI cases every year
Ugh.
globally. It's like, how do you treat that many people? So I see a definite, I'm an advocate for everything, for all tiers. I'm an advocate for the decrim nature because it's a lower tier model to get people this medicine. And then I'm an advocate for the clinical model that's, people are pushing forward in Oregon. And I'm an advocate for these big pharma, biotech companies coming out and researching. And, I haven't said too much publicly, but, been working pretty diligently behind the scenes to be able to build something out with this specific, dosing regimen and protocol, and to get an indication of TBI and to see, again, just to further that efficacy and safety and do studies on it with the FDA. So there's a lot happening for sure in the way of, psychedelics and businesses, and you really want to make sure that that we're doing it the right way, and I think a lot of the companies out there are. So I think there's such a opportunity at the ground floor right now to really get in, and if you have something that's proven, that's worked like we do, then I really, really just feel so passionately about furthering that type of research to, again, get millions of people this type of treatment and this type of option for TBI survivors.
Mm. So you're looking at starting some sort of possibly research center paired with a treatment center, maybe in like Chicago Metro. Is that what I'm hearing?
Um, yeah, well, working with, but I've initiated almost 6 months ago now a clinical development plan, and I've put a really amazing team together as far as clinicians and lead practitioners who've been through over 400 FDA trials. And so, taking it a little, a step further, researching the specific, dosing regimen that I used, and in a microdose form as well as a big dose form, and moving forward in that manner. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't spoken about it publicly at all yet, but it's something that I'm extremely excited about because, again, I advocate for a lot of different people, organizations, and things along that tiered level that I just
Yeah.
mentioned, right? So it's really exciting. I really, when this changed my life, and I was an extreme case, like if this worked for me so well, I'm just really interested to see how it's going to work on other survivors as well as healthy individuals.
Right. There's such a lack of data on psychedelics doing, brain healing. And we really need that more data, I think. Like we have some data and I think it's really good. So I
Right,
always argue for it like in the extreme, even with
right.
some pretty like far out stacks, There's because you read about all these different compounds and all of a sudden neurogenesis is just like slipped in with the property sheet almost. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, like almost everything has this. So what do we
Right.
do? Like, what's optimal? Well, I guess we got to get started though. Just start with mushrooms and then work your way through the rest of it, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that what's exciting is, I don't think that anybody out there right now in this space is thinking about these stacks, right? Or has
Mm.
any anecdotal evidence, or have, 50 plus patients on it that are helping, right? From veteran communities to first responders,
Mm.
uh, to athletes. So that's the most exciting thing about what we're doing, as far as, it's not just psilocybin, it's other adaptogens, it's other mushrooms that help to increase BDNF, specifically like lion's mane, the brain derived neurotrophic factor, which helps to heal axons and myelin sheath and that damage that we talk about, and really solidify new neurological pathways and cells. And then you add in CBD, the only patented neuroprotectant on earth, patented by the US government, in 2003. And you go look at that patent, and it's quite amazing as far as how it protects against brain degeneration. And what are we talking about that's linked to TBI? Is CTE and all of these neurodegenerative diseases. So it just makes so much sense to me, and it made a lot of sense to me. And then you add in the psilocybin that helps, in the bigger doses, the right and left brain hemispheres communicate, stimulating different brain regions. And then you add in, the continued microdose protocol that's over the counter, right? So again, you have this clinic model that you would have to utilize, as well as over the counter food products like the lion's mane reishi cordyceps, and then the prescription microdose in combination with the CBD. So I mean, it's still kind of unbelievable. Like when I begin to talk about it, kind of what I've set in motion, but I mean, I believe in it so much. And I'm still really in awe of what this medicine's done for me. So it's like we have one life to live. How do I help the most people that I can, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We got to contribute back. There's just a lot of people left behind. So, I'm kind of curious. Like, so you started, it sounds like, with the high dose stuff roughly 13 months ago. Like, have you been maintaining with microdosing? Have you done some intermittent bigger dose sessions here and there?
Yeah. So I started, 13 months ago with the 5 grams at the hero dose. And then the next ceremony was about 3.5 months after that. But I took about 2 to 3 weeks after the first ceremony. And then I started up on the microdose protocol in conjunction with the CBD and a medicinal mushroom blend of a lot of different mushrooms, not just one or two. So, and I continued on that protocol, 5 days on, 2 days off for both the CBD and the microdose. So you don't build up a tolerance to either of them, as well as the medicinal mushrooms. And then, yeah, man, as I needed it and as I saw certain things start to creep back in, there's post traumatic stress disorder, which, I definitely suffered from because of the years. I mean, really like decades that I was in hockey. So that's not just going to get cured in 5 hours, right? With one ceremony. And so you have to just, what that does is it helps you kind of self-diagnose. So it just puts you more in tune with what your issues are. And when those start creeping in, then I'm able to self-diagnose and recognize and go back in and know that I need to get another ceremony in. And so that's kind of how I operate. And some of my triggers, or some of the bad habits that creep in where I'm recognizing that, my mental health is, for whatever reason, I have to look within and find out why it's deteriorating. Again, it's things like isolation and things like just simple things like people calling me. I have so much to do but sometimes I don't want to answer. So
Hmm.
like, what is that? And that is a form of isolation. And the oversleeping or undersleeping is one of my really big kind of triggers or symptomology that there's something going on. And then the overeating or undereating. So like those three things I really monitor. Obviously, stress is a little easier to diagnose and the impulse control. If that comes back in, like that's when it's like, all right, then you got to plan for it. You got to plan to go in and I know that I need it. So that's the amazing thing about this medicine. I think the biggest thing, right, is that I think even with what is going on with this virus and what we've been shown, and people have had to really face themselves, and face their own mind. And there's so many outside distractions that we're so stimulated by other things, especially these devices that we have in our hand. We never really look within. And I think that I know this medicine really helps with that. And it helps to connect us back to really what's important, which is the relationship with ourselves and the relationship with others. And for me, I had to start loving myself before I could really start loving others and caring for others. And that is one of the biggest shifts that this medicine helped me do is really solidify that relationship. And instead of calling myself a loser and being hypercritical because that's what I'm used to, you know, um, diagnosing or being critical of every stride or shot is just something that I did, and I was doing that in life, and so now I'm being more gentle, even when that fear creeps in and then the stress, it's like there's a reason that it's there, so I have to just sit down, breathe a little bit, and figure it out, and it's what an amazing tool, a really really amazing tool, because I live less in the over analytical mind now and more in intuition, so that's, and what I told you before about what I'm creating, like, you know, the psychedelic movement is, there's a lot of different views, right? And
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of different really strong personalities, and I've always been extremely clear about my intentions from the beginning. It's to help as many people as we can with this medicine. And so I'll always advocate for different levels of help to get to different communities, that have been traumatized. So, um, yeah, it's a really, I mean, a really, really amazing, and I'd say technology. It is a technology because it's been developed. And, if people are thinking about, researching this more, I really implore them to do it in a sort of traditional sense. And if you can, and, and really, again, like delve into the science so that you understand kind of, where you're going, what you're getting into, and then obviously really responsible use, and I guess this is probably a time where I should, say my little disclaimer piece
Sure.
and not, not, necessarily, advocating or telling people to go and do this, because obviously it's a Schedule 1 here in the States and a Schedule 3 in Canada. But I really do think that if you do the research and you can find, say, for example, an indigenous person on Native American land, or you can go somewhere like Jamaica where it's unregulated and essentially legal, then you have access to, the same type of recovery that I've experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this whole landscape trying to get in is such an interesting project for folks on account of the prohibition. The clinical trials are limited in space, even training opportunities are limited, like for professionals. So it's such a strange thing. Like I can't really think of anything similar.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of gatekeepers,
Mm,
you and yeah, hopefully that access to getting in to be trained as a therapist, or being able to work with the medicine expands. And I think it is. But like anything, I think it takes time. I think MAPS does a really good job with what they're doing in phase 3 trials with MDMA for PTSD in the way of, training therapists. But, I've heard it a lot. Like, I think, again, not advocating for you to go use it, but it's like, I would like to see a world where these therapists have used this medicine, and they're familiar with it, so that they're able to hold that space for people, when they come into the clinical setting to get this type of treatment.
So at Horizons, the big conference last October, this is a really big topic, and we were trying to come up with a good argument that would, convince outsiders. And I heard maybe 10 to 20 different arguments, and I was like, I don't know that that's going to convince a regulator, but I think you're right. It's just a tricky thing to argue.
Yeah, I mean, that's in a perfect world, right?
Right.
It's like, you want to, doctors want to prescribe all of these synthetic medicines for ailments that we don't know what's causing them, but here we'll try this stack of antidepressants and methamphetamines, and do those doctors use that stack? It's just, I think it's a common sense rule, but how will that be implemented or enforced is up to, those companies that are in the space, really, training these doctors. And but I know that there's a lot of really good training out there, and there's a lot of therapists that are making the switch. So hopefully more do.
Right. Like I think as we're still developing psilocybin to be prescribable and doing a lot more clinical trials, things like cannabis assisted psychotherapy and ketamine assisted psychotherapy can do really well because they're cheap in here now, though it's certainly not as like powerful, I don't think, as
Yeah, I
psilocybin
agree.
mushrooms.
I
But
agree. And
yeah,
right. I mean, I just think it's, yeah, it's all individualized, right? Ketamine is really great for, has really, really worked well for soldiers, and MDMA in being able to access that high level emotional trauma without the spikes of that emotion. So they're able to process it, and cannabis is really similar in that way. So, it's funny, we're talking about like cannabis as a kind of gateway into a sort of clinical psychedelic treatment. And my whole life I was told that cannabis is a gateway drug into, cocaine and all those other things.
Right.
So it's yeah, it's funny that we're talking this way, but it's plant medicines as long as it's sourced and grown responsibly and used responsibly, it can have some really, really amazing effects on people for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't until very recently where I heard a doctor talk about how cannabis used medically just needs to be targeted more specifically. There needs to be more education about how best to use it, which I think is really interesting because how many other drugs are like that? But I think we're entering in a new era of kind of integrative psychiatry, I guess, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think, I've had a lot of trauma and I've done EMDR and I've done, speaking to mental health professionals, and it's hard to access that stuff, and sometimes it doesn't even come up, and it'll be a later event in life that'll trigger it, and that's specific to my story where there was a story that came out, 2 years ago or so, a little over 2 years ago, and it was about hazing. And I hadn't thought about the hazing that I experienced when I was a minor, and all of a sudden I was having a panic attack. And I mean, I've had to that point, I had 10 years of talk therapy, and it never came up. I didn't think about it because it was just buried. So I really think that these medicines can help us access the things that we've just put deep, deep, deep down and hidden in a box. And we don't even know it's affecting our quality of life. I think that's like one of the really special things about these medicines.
Right. Yeah. I spent some time in high school sports, right? Everybody, there's hazing all over the place, but how do you know what kind of impact that's going to have? Like for some people, probably barely anything, but like it can be pretty extreme at times. So it's like that can really leave a mark. And I didn't really remember mine until I thought about it yesterday. Had been years since I even thought about it.
Right.
I'm still questioning how scary it actually was, but yeah, like this is a really interesting way to transfer trauma, I guess. If we want to like hypothesize it, like transmitting like a virus sometimes, like that's one way that it could be operating, but um,
For sure. For sure. I mean, you see it play out in hockey specifically and in the hockey communities as far as the abuse stories and a bunch of coaches getting fired over the past, year or so. And it's a problem, especially in that community. If you don't deal like what we have now in the hockey community are traumatized coaches back in an era where there were no cell phones, back in an era where there was no mental health talk. Even when I was coming up, there was no people weren't talking the way they're talking now back in 2003 to 2009 or 10. But you have these traumatized coaches that I don't really think realize that they're traumatized, and they're yelling at kids and just going off the handle, or like 7 or 8 year olds and 6 year olds. And like, that was pretty normal, man, getting yelled at from 4 and using this fear-based tactic of trying to motivate kids. And I don't think it works, and I really do think that these coaches, they have to deal with what is traumatizing them and why they're passing it on. It's like that old adage of, I grew up in an old school Italian household, and my parents, they disciplined us. And, sometimes, most of the time, I'll tell you, it was warranted. Sometimes it just got a little much. And so, that affects you too. And now I have 3 kids under the age of 5. And so, and my wife always, not always, but she's like, like we gotta, like, why don't you discipline? Why aren't you harder on them? Why don't you spank them? And I'm just like, I can't bring myself to do that. I have to stop that cycle of abuse. And I think that there's other ways to teach our kids to, get them to do certain things and not do certain things, without the use of force.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think the times are changing around it. It's kind of interesting how common it still is to talk about it. It's like physical discipline being useful, non-detrimental. I see like there's almost a resurgence of talk about that sometimes. out there. And it's like, what? Come on, guys. Like, keep up. There's a lot of developments happening here.
Well, society's too soft now, right? For some people,
Right.
too soft. And it's, regardless of if parents are hitting their kids or not, it's not about that. The problem, and it's not a problem. The issue, I think, that the old school mentality has is that these kids are empowered. They know too much, from a very early age because of these devices that we have. You have an encyclopedia in your hand, so they really are. They're seeing things that they don't agree with at a younger age, and they're just not gonna, they don't want to deal with it, and so whether that makes somebody soft or whether that, in my opinion, makes them stronger, you know, so it's every decade, every culture coming up is different. And I mean, if it is a softened society, I'm okay with it. It's I don't think it's soft. I just think that these kids are much more educated, and they have a better sense of, what they'll stand for and what they won't at an earlier age, because they're just not as sheltered, you know.
Right. So I've been thinking a lot lately about psychedelics and parenting. Is there anything like you've kind of noticed in like the difference inside your family since you've started healing 13 months ago?
Yeah, just so much more connected to the kids and just really conscious of, listening and making sure they know they're heard. Because usually when they start acting out, it's, because they need attention. And then like with the communication dynamic with my wife has been so much better, and just not internalizing things and just really feeling comfortable enough to talk about the things that are bothering me, and just working it out is just like, that's a total anomaly. And I just never saw that in our family dynamic, and a lot less stress and a lot less, yelling, and just trying to engage with them on their level. And yeah, it's been really amazing. And like for my post concussion syndrome and what this regimen did and how it took away, like for example, light sensitivity. Like I couldn't go outside with glasses, and even if I had them on, it would still be a limited time that I could spend out there. So just little things like that. You don't have to question, oh, sun's too strong, it's not overcast, I don't know if, can I go outside? You do it. You're almost living this normal life where you don't have to worry about those things. And I had a lot of noise sensitivity too. So, kids under the age of 5 and screaming, that really affected me, but that's gotten so much better. And yeah, it's been pretty amazing as far as too, like you tie that back to trauma, like as far as crying goes, like when
Yeah.
my kids were crying and I wasn't well, I was like, oh, it like really affected me, because I hadn't dealt with certain things, certain traumas that I was kind of still crying about inside. And so now it's okay. It's just like you realize it's a natural progression, it's a natural emotion to have, and kids need to express themselves. And you don't need to always try to get them to stop. So I think that, and then just acceptance of how they are, and then just realizing like, man, they are such a mirror of you.
Yeah.
And like my like first 3 years, like with my son, like I'm trying to, get it back as far as like the things that he saw with the yelling and the snapping. And, now I get to show him a different way, and he's still really formidable. Got a couple more years before he's 7. So yeah, it's been really full circle, man, how it's helped with just straight up like my patience levels.
Yeah. Well, that's probably one of the biggest things is patience. So that's really
Mm,
great.
yeah. Yeah. Just take a breath before reacting. You get that little pause in there to become the observer. Again, it's like one of those things that the medicine really helps with.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, relating back to when you were still in the NHL? Like, do you feel like a very different person from your last couple years playing?
Yeah, I mean, I made big strides in the NHL to change who I was during my career.
Mhm.
At 25, I went to rehab, and I had an opiate addiction, just being overprescribed after 2 surgeries. And you know, like I'm a true believer that the addictions are, to these chemicals are just numbing agents, because I just wasn't looking at then what really was coming up is just like my childhood trauma, and just making sure that I mended those relationships with my parents and brothers there, and it was really amazing. We just got to talk, and it was quite remarkable. And so, you know, again, you recognize certain things where I had decisions to make at 25. My career wasn't going the right way, and it was close to being over if I didn't change my ways, and it was either that, get better, or die. Like that's what one of the doctors said to me, put it in a pretty extreme way. And if I didn't get better, I knew that I'd lose my career. And at that point, I thought everything I was a hockey player. So I realize now that I'm just so much more, and that I have so much more to give, rather than just playing a sport. You know?
Right. Yeah. It's it's a weird artifact of our times that we get so niched out that it almost is like creates serious medical or mental health issues for us. Like, I'm only a programmer, I'm only a guitarist, I'm only a athlete. Like, that's one thing you are, and it's like got to be really hard. But it's also hard to go in the other direction after you've been so niched out. Be like, I contain so much. I am so much. It's this really
Yeah,
hard transition.
it really is. And I think specifically, like as an athlete, especially if you become a pro athlete, and even leading up to that, you give up a lot. Like I left home at, 16. It's on the road pretty much every day, practicing 4 times a week at 15. Like everything is hockey, right? And
Yeah.
one of my biggest things is we don't do that self discovery work. Like I was always going to concerts, and, getting out in the different cities that I was in. I got to play in some really amazing cities, and like you know, doing things like when I'd go back into the room the next day and play an NHL game, guys would be like, "What? You went to the Black Keys concert last night? Are you crazy?" Like, I'm like, "No, I didn't have to get drunk. I just went to enjoy a concert." Like guys are just so fearful of that, because if you don't play well, and then someone snapped a picture of you at the concert the night before, like there's just that like added pressure and that fear of reprisal that can come. So guys are just reticent to play it safe. And the problem with that is it's just such a small world, man. Like that hockey world, you're talking about 700 plus guys, 730 guys who do that job. And it's a really small world. So it's really insular, and it's cult like, and it's very institutionalized. And you really, I'm a true believer. You just don't get that discovery work of who you really are, you know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, especially if you have to be so well, you're kind of incentivized to be fearful and careful in a lot of ways, and that's really tough. It's yeah, not to mention the prevalence of cameras everywhere now, and even more so than when you were in. It's just like video cameras everywhere, seems like. So, yeah, it's got to be really really complicated.
Yeah. And then, you're a good soldier, like you want to do the things that please your coach and that your teammates see. And like, again, being a pro athlete, man, you have to dedicate, it's every day, even on your off season, right? Like you're eating well, and you're watching every meal and every calorie, and you're getting into the gym, and there's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of time to, meet new people outside of the hockey community, and then really figure out what makes you tick, and it's one of my things, like the statements that I had to say. It's, I'm not the hockey player named Daniel. I'm Daniel, and I played hockey, so who is Daniel? And I talked to a lot of a lot of guys through like the foundation, and when they're done and they're like, I might want to do other things and this and that. And I'm like, and the first question I posed to them was like, okay, who are you? And they're like, what do you mean? So I think helping them, really suss out like what their biggest motivations are, and what their interests are. You can then apply the lessons that we learned in hockey and the work ethic and all of those really great life lessons, to life now, to the real world, and if that's what guys want, because even in hockey, right? Like you retire from hockey. I did the same thing. I got a rink, taught hockey. It's the only thing I thought I knew how to do. And a lot of guys going to analysts, talking about hockey your whole life, or going to coaching, or and that's great, but for me, I just really I wanted to break free of that and just try to be successful and be my own person away from hockey. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big deal.
yeah, but it's hard. Yeah, it's like extremely difficult to do that. I could have still been signing autographs for a couple $100,000 a year, just cruising through
Right.
life. But it just doesn't work for me, man. And my moral compass does just not allow it.
Right. It doesn't really feel good, right? Like where's that feeling of like contribution, you know?
Yeah. I mean, making kids happy, that's great, like with just a flick of your wrist.
Right.
Uh, but I just think for me, what irked me is just continually living in the past. It's just on like resting on your laurels on it. It just that doesn't work for me.
Well, that's really interesting. So, yeah, when people are, quite present in their day to day, we usually think they're pretty healthy. And I think a lot of folks in professional sports are incentivized to always look back to their past. Like, okay, how'd you do at the 93, World Series or something like that? It's never about like your life or your current accomplishments, or that's the way I might see it. But do you ever see that kind of thing becoming like pathological for folks?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's always right. I think on any level of success, you're always trying to one up your last season or your last game or your last practice, your last shot. You're an artist, your last album. There's always that added pressure and those expectations that you set on yourself, and then just how super hypercritical you are. It's I don't know. I as I think about it, I don't know if you could really get away from that, because that's an element of what makes a lot of players really great and be able to achieve that, because they're just never satisfied. My only thing is like, it just, for me, it doesn't work in the real world. Like that works for professional sports, but in the real world, like I just had to adjust my whole perspective and thinking, and how I spoke to myself, how I, changing the negative motivation to positive. But it's like, that's constant work, because I'm just so used to, you know, being yelled at and then going, it's definitely one of the biggest shifts that I've had. And I had that shift. I was like in 2.5 months after that big ceremony. That's where I knew. I was like, that's what really convinced me. And I'll never forget this. I was driving out to my plants, and they were about, I don't know, 3 feet tall. And it was, we're about 2.5 months in. I was like, wow, Dan, really good job. I had this voice say that. And I'm like, what the hell was that? Where did that come from? I've never done that ever. And I was like, oh man, like something happened, or something shifted. And it wasn't until like that 2 month mark where I was to continuing to get better from that big ceremony, and from the other plant and fungi medicines that I was taking on a daily basis. It was quite amazing. I'll never forget that morning. Super early, sun was rising. It was pretty amazing.
Mm. Yeah, that's extraordinary. After so many years, you got that. And
Yeah,
it seems like something similar has kept up for a while. So
for
it's
sure.
amazing.
Yeah, it was cool, man.
So do you like CTE is a tough topic, right? Because it's somewhat new to the scene. Like, do you kind of feel like you were close to that point before you tried mushrooms?
So yeah, I mean, it can only be diagnosed post-mortem,
Yep.
so when you're dead. So, I always tell people there's no sense in stressing about it. Obviously, what you can do is be proactive, like I am. I'm at a higher risk for contracting not only CTE, but early onset dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's,
It's
uh,
genetically.
ALS, and these tau proteins that we know is just an over secretion, and we don't necessarily know fully the why yet, but I think it's important to note that John Hopkins University is doing an Alzheimer's study. There's some really amazing compounds within the ayahuasca plant that people are studying that creates new brain cells. And there's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of, there is some evidence in early animal studies of medicinal mushrooms breaking up tau proteins after neurotoxins were administered in mice studies.
Are we talking
So,
lion's mane there, or what kind of?
yeah,
Yep.
his name was in there. Yeah. So like I see this stuff and people will argue, oh, that doesn't translate to human trials and that. And I'm just like, oh, let me try it. And it's working for me. I don't know if it's breaking up tau proteins and that, but I just feel so much more clear, my problem solving, multitasking abilities, more in the intuition. And I don't know what the future holds. Like my grandmother died of Alzheimer's, her three
Mm.
siblings died of Alzheimer's. I have dementia on my dad's side. Like it doesn't, it's not a pretty picture for me. But if I live in that the rest of my life, then I know I will contract it. If I am proactive and I just let be what is going to happen, and I try everything in my power to, you know, offset that coming on at an early age and it's not just using these medicines, it's not just using psilocybin, it's watching my alcohol intake and my refined white sugar intake and what I'm eating, processed foods. Like there's a reason that this country has a big Alzheimer's problem and others don't. And I really think that like everything that we're putting into our body could contribute to it. So just being diligent in that manner of eating organically and really getting the right rest. Sleep is super important for TBI survivors and people that are trying to recover brain health and quality of life. So, in conjunction, all of those things working together. Now, I'm not a saint. Like I can't stand these healers or people that are just always talking about the good because yes, sometimes I have a sprite. And yes, sometimes I don't get the sleep that I need, and sometimes I try to assess my mental health in the morning when I'm not hydrated, and sometimes I don't meditate for days on end. And so like I just try to do my best and try to do the things that I know that work for me on a day in and day out basis and try not to get too down when I can't fit some of those things into my schedule.
Yeah. No, it's important to have some self compassion. Have you checked out either of these two books? There's one, End of Alzheimer's, and then the other, Concussion Repair Manual by Dan Engel.
Yeah, I've got the concussion repair manual. Yeah, I know Dan. I know Dan well. He's good.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm recording with him in a few hours.
Nice.
Yeah, the Concussion Repair Manual is really interesting. Just going through all of those interventions that you could potentially stack with psychedelic uh, stuff to help heal. It's pretty
Yeah,
extraordinary.
yeah, man. Like so, when I talk about the journey I've been on for 5 years, the first four was doing a lot of those. Neurofeedback, Mox acupuncture, self deprivation tanks, and functional neurology, using the gyrostim, diagnosing my brain health through the eyes. So, like I always say, this is just the medicine is one tool that can be used in conjunction with these other tools to really help you excel and recover. So yeah, I encourage people to try all of these different modalities and then make a decision on. You'll know right away what's working for you and what's not.
Right. What does Dan say? He's like, stick with everything for at least a month.
At least, man, I have people that when we give this medicine to, and it's a natural form medicine. In our CBD, we use the keef, so it's pretty strong. But some people are like, well, it's been, you know, I don't feel anything. I'm like, okay, how many days were you on it? 2. I'm like, all right, well, you just got to tell people it's not Adderall. It's not synthetic. Just continue to stay on it and maybe increase your dose, specifically of CBD. Make sure you're getting your daily dose of mushrooms, and again, you can stack different adaptogens on top of it, like ashwagandha. It's really great for the brain, and there's so many natural remedies. The issue is for most people is like it's work, and it's not a magic pill. It's not that instant synthetic gratification, so you just have to have some discipline, and unfortunately, the people that usually stick with it are the ones who've suffered enough, but hopefully we can change that through education. I really do. There's a reason that there's a placebo effect and nocebo, and so I think education can really go a long way in solidifying how this medicine works in people.
Right, right. Yeah, this is to me the first year we're getting a lot better microdosing data. So I'm optimistic within a year or two we'll have so much more acceptance of these things around healing brain injuries.
Yeah,
Perhaps not conclusive, but at least like a good starting point.
right, right. Yeah, I'm really really optimistic. Like I think about you think about why traumas happened or why it's sometimes life is difficult or was difficult for years on end, and then I just think it's all brought me to this point with an ability to be able to and the resources to be able to research in an effort to be able to help. So that's like it's really really amazing. It really is. So I'm grateful for everything. And I used to say that and I didn't mean it. I was just kind of saying it to try to convince myself, but I definitely mean it now.
Mm, right. So, do you have an organization you work under or are running at this point?
Yeah, Chapter 5 Foundation, and it's a charitable organization that helps athletes transition into life after the game. And we're transitioning some things about with the organization and to add, these entheogenic plant healing options for when guys get out of the league, and it was specific to pro athletes, but I want to open that up to more people. It was just kind of me and my wife the last 5 years of running it, and so really putting structure behind it now, and again that education, and yeah, I have a CBD and medicinal mushroom company that's made plant health, and that's just providing a lot of the same formulations, PhD formulated, all grown organically, everything targeted at brain and immune health, and a lot of the again same formulations that helped me get better. So those would most likely be the biggest, and yeah, I'm on pretty active on social and Instagram, Daniel Carcillo 13, and Twitter is Carbomb Boom 13, which was my persona or the guy I was when I was in my career. And yeah, just anybody can reach out on any of those platforms. There's contact information for me.
Outstanding. Well, Daniel Carcillo, this is really great. I hope people learned a bunch from you, and I just really appreciate that you're out there doing the work you are. I live in a kind of ski snowboard world where head injury is, every other week. So
Mm,
I'm just really happy to see that people are taking it more seriously and that you're taking it so seriously and that you've gotten so much help.
thanks, man. Yeah, and I appreciate what you're doing and the platform and how you're educating. That's first and foremost, man. So thanks for everything you guys are doing.
And there you have it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. It was really great for me to connect with Daniel and dig into the TBI topic. I just really appreciate that there are folks that are willing to stand up and you know, stake a flag in the ground and really fight for this possible treatment for folks with TBIs. And you know, there's a lot of tragedies that led to us not having this medicine prescribable and even researched for decades. So I'm just really grateful that we're at the point in history where we can talk pretty openly about this for the most part. Folks like Daniel have to really go out on a limb and, you know, don't get included in a lot of NHL stuff as a result. So a lot of other organizations probably don't want to include Daniel, but it's not really up to them. It's up to us, and it's up to compelling stories to get things moving in the right direction here. So anyway, I hope you liked that one. I hope you follow up with Daniel and follow his work. Yeah. So looks like there are, you know, care options coming in the future. Just stay tuned. And, you know, folks, if you need a great book on concussions, there's a Dr. Dan Engel, who's coming up soon in the podcast, wrote this book, Concussion Repair Manual, and it was really good. So I'd check that out too. It's just a great way to understand what's going on there and to look at all of the different options that are available. So we get into that more in a week or two when Dan Engel comes on. But yeah, in the meantime, check it out if it's of interest to you. Yeah, I guess that's it for the outro here. If you want to learn more about how to get more professional education in the psychedelic space, come on down to psychedeliceducationcenter.com and look up our 8-week Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course, where we dig deep into the topic of psychedelics, clinical applications, and much more. In my opinion, this is the greatest foundations course that's available right now, and I think you will like it if you join us. The testimonials are all up on the website there, the psychedeliceducationcenter.com page, and you can learn all about it there. And if you have questions, please hit us up at psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. We do offer student discounts to some of our classes. And if you have hardship and you can't afford the class, just let us know, write to us, and we'll have a conversation with you. And yeah, we just want a lot of people in there. And just so you know, about 40 people max. One course is almost all the way sold out. The other one's more than halfway sold out. So if you want to join us, come on in pretty soon, and we will see you there. All right, everybody. This is Joe Moore signing off for Psychedelics Today. We will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.